talking with me.
Okay,
How would you describe the state of the world today?
very getting more difficult. I think our biggest problem is that Earth civilization is not in a sustainable path due to overpopulation and overconsumption, and we're eating ourselves out of house and home, and we're going to have to do something differently if we can keep our civilization going.
So, in your view, where does this come from? I mean, we are supposedly the intelligent species on this planet. We supposedly are the most conscious being. How is it that we are such a conflicted being and can cause such dissonance?
Well, if you look at the population growth, at the end of the 19th century, there were only 2 billion people on Earth, and at the end of the 20th century, there were over 6 billion people, headed for 7, and we're now headed for 8. And the consumption has risen simultaneously. And so, essentially, we're eating ourselves out of house and home, and we're overpopulating, propagating too rapidly. And most of the world is not truly understanding that that is a big issue. They're just going right ahead, living their lives the way they want to, and fighting their wars and doing what they want without a concern that the big picture that we're overpopulating and overconsuming.
What about the human being, him and herself? I mean, it seems internally we are a conflicted being. I mean, even if there was 8 billion of us, I would imagine if we were a centered, balanced being, we could create a harmonious world. In your view,
We can. I believe we can. However, our learning process is such that we haven't learned during the 20th century to take our consciousness, which has been my subject matter, we haven't learned to take our consciousness seriously and understand what it's really all about and integrate it into our science. Consciousness has not been a major subject of concern throughout all the 20th century. We only really brought it into science with Einstein and Max Planck at the end of the 19th century, when they set up the rules that turned out to be what we now call quantum mechanics. And it took all the 20th century to understand that awareness and consciousness are rooted in the quantum world, and it's more fundamental than this the Newtonian Keplerian world that was our physics for 400 years. So we're out propagating our knowledge base, or have been for the 20th century.
there's a select few relative to the whole that understand that whole concept of quantum understanding. To get 7.9 billion other human beings to understand that and adjust their perception of reality, that's a monumental task. How does that happen?
Well, it happened because we learned from what we knew at the into the 20th century. We learned how to satisfy our pleasures, and we didn't really emphasize taking responsibility for our activities quite as well as we should have. And this new thing, awareness and consciousness, really wasn't considered a major problem that we had to deal with. So the 20th century really was a turning point in which we just overpopulated and overconsumed and didn't realize what we were doing, so it's almost too late.
And how about you yourself personally? You obviously went through a very academic career and a very scientific beginning. Were you always aware of a spiritual or a consciousness approach to life, or were you a more technical, pragmatic sort of person?
Well, my family my mother's side was particularly very religious. We grew up in the Christian faith, and I did too, but my interest has always been somewhat in cosmology. Where did all this come from? How did it get to be here? And the way I got to be an astronaut was, and go to the moon and start to get a new perspective on things, was somewhat of, well, I won't say an accident by any means, but I kind of fell into it uh, because I was about to be drafted into the Korean War in 1952, but I was already a pilot, but I had just married, graduated from college, and neither the Navy nor the Air Force took married men into the flight school, and I was already a pilot. I'd learned to fly when I was just a kid, and so I had to rectify that if I was going to serve my country in the military, and I did. I enlisted in the Navy, became a seaman, and because I was educated, I went to boot camp, became an officer, then became an officer, and then I applied for flight school and got it. But I was already a pilot, and I went to Pensacola Flight School in 1953 and got my pilot's license and my wings as a naval aviator, and spent the decade of the 50s in the Pacific aboard aircraft carriers. Then, as that decade was coming to an end, Sputnik went up, the Soviets set up Sputnik, and a new era in space opened up, and I was just in a prime position to take part of that, and applied and got into it, and so by the end of the 1960s, I was in the astronaut program and getting ready to go to the moon.
Would you say that there is a divine force in the universe, a supreme being, or a universal design?
I wish I knew the answer. I think, as a cosmologist, all I can say is I know the questions. I just don't know all the answers. If one says there is a supreme being in the universe, then one has to ask from whence came the supreme being, and we can't answer that question either. So our knowledge, and furthermore, the universe is now, as it's appearing to us, is far more huge, humongous than we ever thought, and we're simply one grain of sand on a huge beach. It appears at this point in time, and so that question of a supreme being and our place in the universe, to me, is still unanswered, and it's becoming more complex to answer as we go on. And as I see it, as we're just a grain of sand on a huge beach, and there's nothing, I don't believe, really special about us. There's undoubtedly light throughout the universe, and that life comes and goes, and we may go if we don't learn how to stay alive.
Do you feel a sense of purpose? Do you think that,
Yes. Yes, my sense of purpose for my life at this point is to serve the greater good. It's to help us realize that we're not on a sustainable path, to use the tools and the knowledge that we have accumulated in the last century or so, and to help us preserve our civilization as long as we can, and if we're lucky enough, join up with ETs so that they teach us how to get outside of our solar system, if that's what we've got to do.
In a way, though, would you say that the concept of 0 point energy, more energy, or freer energy, if we're a flawed being that is handling more power, doesn't the change have to really come from the being itself as opposed to the abilities that it possesses? Do you know what I mean by that?
Don't quite understand the orientation of your question.
Like you say, we're obviously facing a critical time in the evolution of our species. Is the solution that everybody needs to go inward, or do we need solutions for energy, solutions for community?
Okay, my answer to that is I believe, we have the tools and the capabilities within us to solve our problems. We have to realize there is a problem and set our approach to solving it. And in my opinion, the problem that we are facing right now is to see ourselves as another species in a huge universe, and to learn how to be that species in a huge universe, which we have thought most of the last century or so, that perhaps we're alone. We didn't realize that there are other beings out there. And even though I suspect the ETs have been here for centuries themselves, observing us for quite some time. And so we have to use what tools we have, our intelligence, our creativity, our to look at ourselves, learn, and come to grips with the problem of our survival.
So, how about you personally? You're the evolution of your consciousness. Um, how are you different before your experience of leaving the Earth's atmosphere and, of course, walking on the moon, um, to that experience before that, and to the experience that how you experience life now, your perception of reality now?
Well, yes, that's certainly going to the moon, getting off the planet, and looking at Earth in the heavens affected all of us that did that. We call it the overview effect. There is a set up an organization to sponsor this based in North Carolina. That's I didn't set it up, but others set it up, and all of the other astronauts have had some phase of this type of experience from looking at Earth from out there. And yes, it has indeed caused a expansion of thinking, thinking about things in a more powerful way, and hopefully, as in my case and many other cases that I'm aware of, yearning to help serve the problem that is our natural problem in our civilization. How do we keep it going? How do we survive?
The experience itself, when you left the atmosphere, what did you feel? Was there fear? Was there excitement? Was there...
No, there was excitement of being an explorer. We had trained well. We knew our equipment. We practiced everything we were going to have to do over and over and over again. So it was a matter of going through the motions of going to the moon and doing the things we practiced. But what most of us didn't expect was a powerful experience of seeing Earth in the larger space of the universe and seeing it as a little planet, even though we might have known, and we certainly did know, that was the situation. But there's something, my own experience, I had to ask some other neuroscientists and so forth to help me understand. And they came back and said, okay, that's called salvakapa samadhi, which is in the ancient Sanskrit. But in the ancient Greek, it's called metanoia, change of mind, change of heart. In the Buddhist tradition, it's metanoia, or satori, enlightenment. So our ancient peoples have had these types of insights for a long, long, long time. And so here we are, we're having a new one because we're getting outside of our planet and taking a look at ourselves. And to me, that's just the natural process of, okay, let's do something about it. We're endangering ourselves from overpopulation and overconsumption. Let's do something about it.
You know, I just interviewed Dr. Bruce Lipton. I don't know if you know who he is.
Well, he and I have lectured on the same platform quite often.
Right, great. But he was saying, I agree that he was saying that just those pictures shifted the perception of humanity towards the planet.
Yeah. Yes. Yes, Bruce and I have worked on some interesting things together, and we've been on the same lecture stage quite frequently. Well, not recently, but frequently in the past.
Well, it seems there are lots of people that are representatives of different aspects of science and religion and even politics that are now developing this new awareness, that are trying to bring what you're trying to bring into their fields.
Yes.
Would you say that the evolution of humanity is linked to conflict? I mean, linked
to what?
Well, to pressure, to conflict. Is that what drives us to evolve consciousness?
Well, certainly conflict is a part of it, and there's no doubt that throughout all of human evolution and history, conflict and disagreement has been a major part of our learning to cope with life, because it's around us all the time, always has been. And learning how to deal with it, that's what being a human, I think, is all about. And not just human, all the animal species had their same problems too. And I've recently become enamored with watching how animal species, bird species, interact with each other. And I have a whole host of birds and had several dogs in my household, and watching them interact with each other carefully in ways that I hadn't observed before. And then I was reading an article just yesterday of crows giving presents back to humans when they left food for them. And all of those things, those are interesting facets that we have to learn about ourselves as we evolve into this presumably more intelligent, alert species.
So you personally, when you have an internal moment of conflict, whatever that may be, how do you personally deal with it?
I'm a meditator. Will go inside and try to ask myself, okay, what are you doing about this? What's the right thing to do about this? And we have these intuitive gifts, I believe. I've developed mine a bit, that with meditation, etc., we seem to be able to find the right answers within ourselves.
Do you ever feel despair when you look at the news?
Oh, well, yes, I feel despair I feel despair over the current situation of what I think is non-sustainability. I'm hoping, I want that we humans get a hold of our problem and turn this thing around and get control of it. I am not terribly confident that we will, or we need to, but I'm not confident that we will. We may very well extinguish ourselves. And before we get the capability to even get off this planet in a major way to get somewhere else. But we'll see. We've got to work at it.
So what do you see as the impediment? Like we were saying earlier, we're an intelligent species. I mean, you've probably dealt with the highest levels of government in the U.S. and in science. Aren't these people, what is the fundamental difference between how these people see the world and how you see the world?
Well, I think there's, at the moment, too many people concentrating on personal wealth for themselves rather than what they can do to serve the greater good. I think that's a major thing. Certainly here in the United States, it's very prevalent that everyone is trying to be a wealthy family and press on to their children wealth, which is fine, but if it gets in the way of serving the greater good and helping us survive, then it's misplaced.
That interview with Bruce Lipton was a very good interview, and he kind of brought along a few concepts that I did not understand. For instance, Darwinism, just the whole concept of Darwinism, how that we've adopted this idea of competition and survival of the fittest, and,
Yes.
and we've ran with that concept and put it into all of our paradigms, our political paradigm, our religious paradigms, our economic paradigm.
Yes, but surviving, but the fittest also turns out to mean if we want the species to survive, we have to serve the greater good as well. And that hasn't been into it so much. Only peripherally has it been in, and we have to make that a larger portion of our thinking of what can we do to serve the whole.
And is that why you developed the Institute of Noetic Science?
Yes, because I realized there was something missing in our science, and for 400 years after Rene Descartes, science, consciousness and awareness was not a proper subject for science. It's only when we discovered, thanks to quantum mechanics coming along, that we're dealing with a quantum phenomenon here, and that there was a quantum phenomenon. And we can now say that our universe, the primary features of our universe, are not matter and energy, but matter and energy and awareness. And awareness is the bottom rung of consciousness. And we know that has taken all of the 20th century to bring that lesson home.
Are you familiar with Nassim Haramein?
I know the name, yes.
Because there seems to be some people out there that are into the same things that you are.
Yes.
But it seems like they're all little islands that are separate from each other. Does there have to be that? Does that community have to integrate?
Well, if we're all speaking out of the same handbook, which I think we mostly are, it's coming together. I think there's a lot more cooperation and coming together. And my Noetic Foundation has grown from just a very small organization we're in 66 different nations and universities now. And so, all hopefully teaching this same larger message that we got to do this together, folks, or we're not going to make it.
Just another personal question, if you don't mind. How has your awareness evolved over your lifetime? I mean, we all might be minuscule grains of sand, but to some people, we are God itself in a fractal form. So your fractal form, the fractal form that is Edgar Mitchell, how has that evolved over your lifetime?
Well, let's say I'm noted as being a fairly intellectual person, and but I was taught from my youth by my parents to love my neighbors, and it comes right out of Christian faith. Love your neighbors as yourself, and to me, that's just kind of naturally evolved in my life that I got privilege, and to act on that privilege to serve the greater good. That my reward for serving, for being aware of these things, was I had to do something about it.
If you could make a public service message to humanity, what would you say to people?
Exactly what we're talking about right here. That they have to learn to serve the greater good, learn that we're all in this together, that our species is in danger of our own downfall, of not being caring for the larger picture and caring for each other enough, and we have to, and it's up to each of us to develop that internal instinct to go for it.
So does that need to be developed, or does it need to be unleashed?
Well, unleashed to begin with, but then developed. We all have that capability, but we have to become aware of it and then do something about it. And I see that happening, but I also see others that are firmly rooted in the me. I'm only here to make money and pass it on to my family.
Well, it's a funny congruence at these times, because it seems like technology has gotten to the point that we're all looking in little boxes. We've projected our magic onto devices that can do amazing things.
Yes, that's true.
We've forgotten what we're capable of as beings.
And that is part of the problem. We haven't taken our own individual responsibility, in my opinion, to serve the greater good the way we're supposed to.
And where does that start for people? Where does it start for people to find that within themselves, do you think?
Well, I think there's a message in not just Christianity, but in Christianity it's called love thy neighbor as thyself. And you start with that. You're saying it's really a part of me, and my projection is to be the best person I can and help my neighbor to be a better person, and to collectively we will help others to be a better person, and we'll make the whole world better because we are serving the greater good.
So another thing about the congruence of these times seems to be that there seems to be such a polarity with that view, doesn't there? It seems to be so obvious nowadays that there are two obvious camps of me and the collective.
Yes, I agree. And we have to, the me is always there inside us, but we have to overcome that and say, but it's not going to do me any good or my children any good if I just concentrate on me and us and don't concentrate on anything about the greater good.
Thank you so much.
All right, thank you.
I really appreciate it. Like I say, it's really an honor to allow me to speak with you.
Well, I'm glad to talk with you. We're thinking about the same sort of things, and that's serving the greater good and making this world survive.
Exactly, and I'm trying to, in my own way, to link everybody as well, so that somebody who's familiar with Bruce Lipton becomes familiar with you, somebody who's familiar with you that becomes with Nassim Haramein, and all these other people that are approaching this result from different points of view.
Yeah, and where are you located, please? I don't know.
I'm in Vancouver, BC.
Oh, in Vancouver.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I know a lot of people up there.
Oh, do you?
I used to. Well, does the name Adam Dreamhealer?
Yes, of course.
Well, that's Bruce Lipton, and I worked with him together many years, quite a few years ago, in Vancouver. We were up there.
Yeah. He's very well known here.
Fortunately, he did heal me of a prostate condition many years ago. And as I said, Bruce and I worked with him, so we all knew each other quite well and worked together.
Well, it's great to see all these magnificent human beings connecting, and I'm so honored, like I say, to have met you and spoken with you.
Well, thank you. Let's stay in touch and see where we go.
Yes, thank you. Okay.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.